Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be going over tips for your externship on medical assisting. So I will be going over 4 main points today, which will be the interview, how to prepare, what to expect, and tips. But first, I am going to go over the interview process. So I'm not entirely sure how it's working specifically for you, but I will use my experience as an example. So I received an email from my school saying that they found a placement for me for my externship. And basically what happened was I went ahead and got their contact information, and I went ahead and I called them, introduced myself over the phone, and asked them simple questions like, if there was a dress code that I needed to follow, or if there was a certain color scrubs that I needed, just the basic information. And then that's how that call ended. So for my interview process, it was supposed to be taken in person, but because of certain factors, I ended up doing the interview over the phone. So basically, some tips before the interview actually even takes place is to research the organization or facility, to do your research beforehand. So let's say it's an urgent care that you're doing your externship at. What's the urgent care's history? What is their mission statement? Think of questions to ask them. Is there possibilities of furthering your education with them? Do they offer that? Things of that nature. Then you're going to want to have your resume together. So with the resume, I recommend having a cover letter specifically for your externship. So if it's an urgent care, you want to say, you want to address it directly to them and have a personalized cover for them. And you also want to have your actual resume and then your references. And before the interview takes place, you want to know where you're going. So once you get the information about your externship site, I would recommend Googling it. Google it. How long is it going to take you to get there? What does traffic look like? And take the drive a day or two before, maybe even a week before, just to know and get familiar with the road, which street you're taking, what does the traffic look like, how long is it going to get you to get there, so that way you are not late to your interview. Being late is just not going to make you look good. Not only that, but you want to have questions ahead of time. I think it's really important for us to have questions to be able to ask them, because they're the ones interviewing us, right? So they're asking question, but what about us? What does this site have to offer us as well? Again, do they have opportunities for you to further your education? What makes their facility distinct to other facilities that interests you personally, and things like that. Another tip that I have for the interview process is always to arrive early. When I arrived to my interview, I showed up about 10 minutes early just so I can park there, go over, my notes or whatever I needed or whatever questions I had written down for them. That way I could be a little bit more prepared on time. I had a second to breathe, compose myself, and prepare myself before I went into the actual interview. You also want to be confident, and I know that's kind of, I don't know, because of the nervousness, you're kind of like, I am not confident, but you need to be confident. So you need to be confident, and I always recommend putting your phone on silent. You don't want to be in the middle of an interview and then have your phone ring, because number one, it looks not professional. Number two, it just doesn't look like you're prioritizing the situation, and you don't want it to come off that way, especially when you're trying to get this externship site to get you onto their team to teach you. And that leads me to my second point, which is how to prepare. So one thing that we're gonna talk about is the dress code. So I know that I mentioned previously that I called them and I asked them. So I would suggest doing that ahead of time, because if that facility only uses blue scrubs, you don't wanna be the one to show up in red scrubs. So I asked them, their hair code, dress code, and nail polish. Some facilities allow nail polish, some facilities don't. Some facility allows short nails, acrylic, some do not. And that's something that you want to figure out ahead of time, because you don't want to show up with long acrylic nails and that is completely off of the dress code for that facility. I would also recommend going over certain procedures like ear lavages. If your program did phlebotomy and EKG, I would recommend going over those as well. Obviously, the first day you will most likely shadow the medical assistant who's training you, but just for the sake of knowledge, and if they do ask you questions, I know my instructor did. She right away asked me the 7 rights. So if you know the 7 rights, good. If you don't, maybe you'll want to review those as well. And they're just things that you want to prepare. So if they do ask you any questions, you want to look like you are on top of your A game. I would also recommend bringing a small notebook and sticky notes. So when they were first showing me, around and how they do things, when I first started taking vitals, I wasn't actually inputting them into the computer like their EHR system. I was actually writing them on sticky notes or in my notebook, and then I would go ahead and transfer those onto the computer until I got used to their system. So that's also something, you want to prepare. Bring your notebook to write notes, write procedures down, or if you learn something new, even if you think you'll remember it, I suggest you still write it down, just because if anything, you have it to look back on. And sticky notes, because sticky notes will be your best friend as they were mine. Something you can write really quickly, rip it off, throw it away if you need to, or if that's something that you need to permanently write into your notebook. So I highly suggest bringing those things, and I think that is the best way to prepare. I also suggest buying your own stethoscope. I do have my own. I went ahead and just purchased this. I can go ahead and leave the link below of where it is that I purchased it. My facility site did say that they could let me borrow one. I preferred using my own just so I can get used to my own things and get accustomed to those things. So I would recommend buying your own stethoscope and using that, getting accustomed to your own. That way you're familiar with it, and when you're taking vitals, it'll help you feel a lot more comfortable when you use your own things. Now we can go ahead and move on to the third point, which is what to expect during your externship. For the first day, I was shadowing a lot because I was meeting everybody, I was introducing myself, I was trying to learn everybody's names. So for the first day, I just shadowed and I paid attention to the office dynamic, both back office and front office. What is their responsibilities? What are their roles? How do they communicate with the provider? That provider medical assistant dynamic, it's really important. So I was really paying attention to all those things, and something that I think should also be paid attention to is the patients, obviously. But I came to realize while I was working and doing my externship that all patients are different. And although this may seem like something obvious, I think or at least for me, it kind of surpassed me where I didn't think about it. That fact that, this patient could have a cold and this patient could have a cold, but they can feel very differently about being sick. Someone will just want to brush off their cold while the other person can feel really distraught about being sick. And my point being is that these two patients, although maybe they're sick with the same thing, they can both feel very differently. And I think the approach that you take as a medical assistant should be different and accommodate, to the patient that you have. The first person that the patient sees is you, the medical assistant. You're taking their vitals, you're asking them for their chief complaint, and you want to build a sense of, almost like you're giving almost like you're providing comfort to the patient that, they are in good hands, that the provider is going to help them in any way possible. You want to be that patient advocate for them. And I think it's important to realize that everybody is different, everyone acts differently, and everyone takes things differently. So as a medical assistant, I think it's something that just should be kept in the back of your mind as you work with different people and get to experience different things. This brings us to our last point, which is general tips. I think one of the most biggest tips I can give is to be useful. Take initiative, be a busybody and ask questions. I think it's important to ask questions because that just shows that you're actively engaging, you're actively listening, you're trying to learn things and apply them as you're working. You also want to seem useful because if all the medical assistants are busy checking in patients and checking out patients, what are you doing? Like you want to take initiative, because if you take initiative, that just shows that you're understanding the office dynamic in the facility that you're working at, and they will be able to see that you're a team player, and maybe that can help towards you being hired at your externship site. So not only that, but I'll give an example. When I was working at my externship site, the medical assistants that I were working with were checking in and checking out patients. They were both busy and they couldn't clean the patient rooms. So I went ahead and took the initiative and just cleaned the patient rooms. That way, whenever they checked in the patients, I could go ahead, take them into the rooms, take their vital signs while they went ahead and finished the administrative duties. So things like that. Obviously, you'll be able to take more initiative within time once you learn the office dynamic. What is it that they do? What is everybody's roles? And eventually you will be able to take the initiative with confidence. So I hope that these tips were helpful. I know it was a bit of a lot, but I hope that while you're doing your externship, or if you're coming up on your externship, that this helps you. And if you have any other questions, please let me know down below and I will be sure to answer them as soon as possible. Thank you again, and I will see you guys in my next video.